When Patricia Chambers demanded I hand over my $1.2 million house to my pregnant half-sister in front of 47 guests at my own housewarming party, screaming that I was selfish, ungrateful, and didn't deserve what I had, she had absolutely no idea what she was actually asking for. She thought I was just her stepdaughter who'd gotten lucky with some corporate job. In reality, I'd spent the last 8 years building a tech startup from nothing, working 80-hour weeks, and I'd bought that house entirely on my own, at age 28 with money I'd earned myself. What happened next would expose her 15-year pattern of favoritism, reveal financial fraud involving my late father's estate, and ultimately lead to her losing access to a $3.8 million trust fund she'd been controlling illegally. Comment where you're watching from right now and drop a like if you believe hard work should be respected. Let me take you back and show you exactly how this all started. My name is Rebecca Harrison, and I'm 30 years old. The house that would become the center of this entire conflict wasn't just any property to me. It was a 3-bedroom contemporary home in the Riverside district, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, a home office where I'd spent countless nights coding, and a small garden where I could finally breathe after years of living in cramped apartments. I'd closed on it exactly 3 weeks before the party, and every single dollar of the $240,000 down payment had come from my own savings. No family money, no inheritance. Just me, my laptop, and 8 years of relentless work building security software for healthcare companies. I'd started my company, SecureHealth Solutions, when I was 22 years old, right after graduating with a computer science degree. Back then, I was working out of a tiny studio apartment, surviving on ramen and coffee, writing code until 3 a.m. most nights. The first 2 years, I didn't take a single paycheck. Everything went back into the business. By year 3, we landed our first major client, a regional hospital network that needed HIPAA-compliant data protection. By year 5, we had 23 employees and contracts with 14 healthcare systems across 6 states. And by year 8, when I bought that house, SecureHealth Solutions was generating $4.7 million in annual revenue and employed 67 people. Patricia had married my father, Richard Harrison, when I was 15 years old. My mother had passed away from cancer when I was 12, and Dad had been lonely. Patricia seemed nice enough at first. She had a daughter from her previous marriage, my half-sister Amber, who was 2 years younger than me. I tried to be welcoming. I really did. But it became clear pretty quickly that Patricia had a very specific vision of how our blended family would work, and that vision involved Amber getting everything while I faded into the background. When I was 16, Dad offered to help pay for college for both of us. Patricia immediately suggested that since I was so smart with computers, I could probably get scholarships, and maybe it would be better to save the college fund for Amber, who really needed the support. Dad went along with it. I ended up taking out $47,000 in student loans while Amber got a free ride to a private liberal arts college where she changed majors 4 times and eventually dropped out in her junior year. When I was 19 and interning at a tech company making $12 an hour, Patricia suggested I should help pay rent at home since I was practically an adult now. Meanwhile, Amber, who was 17 and worked part-time at a clothing store, kept every cent she earned for personal expenses. I paid $400 a month in rent while living in my childhood bedroom. When I graduated college at 22 and started my company, Patricia told everyone at the family gathering that it was cute that I was playing businesswoman and asked when I'd get a real job. When my company landed its first major contract at year 3, Patricia mentioned that Amber was thinking about starting a lifestyle blog and suggested I should hire her as my social media manager for $50,000 a year, despite Amber having 0 marketing experience. My father passed away suddenly from a heart attack when I was 26 years old. It was devastating. He was only 58, and in the grief and chaos that followed, something happened that I didn't fully understand until much later. Dad's will left everything to Patricia, which wasn't unusual for a married couple, but there was supposed to be a trust fund set up for me and Amber equally, approximately $400,000 each from his life insurance and investments. Patricia was named as the trustee, responsible for distributing the funds when we each turned 30, or in the event of major life purchases like a house or wedding. When I turned 28 and was ready to buy my house, I asked Patricia about accessing my trust fund for the down payment. She told me the trust had underperformed and was now worth only $180,000 total, meaning $90,000 for each of us. She said the 2008 recession had hit it hard and it never recovered. I was disappointed, but accepted it. I'd worked hard enough that I had my own savings, so I put together the down payment from my own money and bought the house anyway. Here's what I didn't know at the time. Patricia had been lying about the trust fund for the last 4 years. The actual value was $847,000. She'd been siphoning money from it gradually, using it for luxury vacations, a new car for Amber, and renovations on her own house. By the time I bought my house, she'd already taken roughly $380,000 illegally. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the housewarming party. It was a Saturday afternoon in late September, and I'd invited about 50 people, a mix of work colleagues, friends from college, and yes, family. Patricia and Amber were both invited, of course. I'd even invited Patricia's sister, Margaret, and a few family friends who'd known Dad. I wanted to celebrate this accomplishment. I was 28 years old, and I owned my home. In this economy, after building a successful business from scratch, I was proud, and I wanted to share that pride with the people in my life. The party started at 2 p.m. I'd hired a catering company to handle the food. Nothing too fancy, just good quality appetizers, a taco bar, and a small dessert table. I'd set up the main gathering space in my living room and opened the back patio doors so people could flow outside to enjoy the September weather. By 2:30, about 35 people had arrived, and the energy was exactly what I'd hoped for. Warm, celebratory, relaxed. Patricia and Amber arrived at 2:45 p.m. Patricia was wearing an expensive-looking cream pantsuit with gold jewelry, and Amber was in a floral maternity dress. Yes, Amber was pregnant about 6 months along with her first child. She'd gotten married 8 months earlier to Derek, a guy she'd been dating for less than a year. They'd had a rushed wedding that Patricia had paid for entirely, approximately $35,000 for 120 guests. I greeted them at the door with genuine warmth. "Patricia, Amber, I'm so glad you made it," I said, giving them each a hug. Patricia's eyes scanned my entryway, taking in the contemporary light fixtures, the hardwood floors, the open concept layout. "Well," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "this is certainly spacious." "Thank you," I said, smiling. "Let me give you the tour." I walked them through the main floor, showing them the living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern kitchen with stainless steel appliances and a large island, my home office with built-in shelving, and the 3 bedrooms upstairs, including the master suite with an ensuite bathroom. I was proud of every room. I decorated carefully but not extravagantly, mixing affordable furniture with a few investment pieces. Amber kept touching her belly and making these little sighs as we walked through. "It's really nice, Rebecca," she said, her tone slightly wistful. "Derek and I are still in that tiny 2-bedroom apartment. It's going to be so cramped when the baby comes. I'm sure you'll figure it out," I said encouragingly. "Lots of families make small spaces work." We returned downstairs and I introduced Patricia and Amber to some of my work colleagues. My CTO, David Chen, was there with his wife. My lead developer, Jennifer Martinez, had brought her girlfriend. Several of my former professors from university had come. These were people who'd watched me build my career from the ground up, and I was happy to have them in my space. For the first hour, everything was fine. Patricia chatted politely with guests, Amber ate from the taco bar, and I circulated through the party, making sure everyone was comfortable and had drinks. Around 4 p.m. I noticed Patricia and Amber standing in a corner of the living room, talking quietly but intently. Patricia kept glancing at me, then at the house, then back at Amber. Something was wrong. At 4:20 p.m., I was in the kitchen refilling the guacamole when Patricia approached me. Her expression had shifted from the polite smile she'd been wearing all afternoon to something harder. "Rebecca, can we talk?" she said, her voice low but firm. "Of course," I said, setting down the bowl. "Is everything okay?" Patricia glanced around at the guests nearby and then said, "Privately." I led her to my home office and closed the door. Amber followed us in, her hand resting on her pregnant belly in that protective gesture she'd been doing all day. "What's going on?" I asked, genuinely concerned that something was wrong. Patricia crossed her arms and looked at me with an expression I'd seen many times over the last 15 years, the expression that said I'd somehow disappointed her. "Amber and I have been talking," she said, "and we think it's incredibly selfish of you to have bought such a large house just for yourself when Amber and Derek are struggling in that apartment with a baby on the way." I blinked, not quite processing what she'd just said. "I'm sorry, what?" "This house has 3 bedrooms, Rebecca," Patricia continued. her voice taking on that lecturing tone she used when she thought she was being reasonable. "You're single. You don't have children. You don't need this much space." Meanwhile, Amber is about to have a baby and she's living in 900 square feet with a husband who makes $41,000 a year as a junior accountant. It's not fair. "I worked for this house," I said slowly, feeling heat rising in my chest. "I saved for 8 years. I built a business. This isn't about fair or unfair. I earned this. And Amber is about to be a mother," Patricia shot back. "She needs stability. She needs space. You have your career, Rebecca. You're always going to be fine, but Amber needs help right now." Amber stepped forward, tears forming in her eyes. "I'm not asking for charity, Rebecca," she said, her voice trembling. "But you're my sister. I thought you'd want to help me. I felt like I was in some alternate reality." "Help you how exactly?" Patricia took a breath and then she said it. "We think you should give Amber and Derek this house." The words hung in the air like something physical. I actually laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "Give them my house, the house I just bought 3 weeks ago? You could find another place?" Patricia said, as if this was perfectly reasonable. "Something smaller. An apartment, maybe. You don't need all this." "Are you serious right now?" I asked, my voice rising despite my attempt to stay calm. "Patricia, this is my home. I bought it with my own money. Money I earned. I'm not giving it away." "So you're saying you care more about having extra bedrooms than about your sister's well-being?" Patricia's voice was getting louder now. "You care more about your own comfort than about your niece or nephew having a proper home?" "That's not what I'm saying at all," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Amber and Derek are adults. They need to figure out their own housing situation. I can't just hand over a $1.2 million property because it would be convenient for them." $1. $2 million? Patricia's eyes widened. "You paid $1.2 million for this house?" "Yes," I said. "It's the Riverside district. Property values here are high. I saved for years to afford the down payment." Patricia's face flushed red. "Well, then you clearly have plenty of money," she said. "If you can afford a $1.2 million house, you can certainly afford to help your family. Your father would be ashamed of you right now." That hit like a punch. "Don't bring Dad into this," I said, my voice shaking. "Dad wanted me to succeed. He would have been proud that I built something from nothing. Your father wanted you to be a good person," Patricia snapped. "And right now, you're showing how selfish you really are. You've always been like this, Rebecca. Ever since I married your father. Always thinking about yourself, your grades, your career, your achievements. Never once thinking about what Amber might need, what I might need. You're so focused on proving how successful you are that you've forgotten what family means." "I haven't forgotten anything," I said, anger now overtaking my shock. "I paid rent when I lived at home while Amber didn't. I took out loans for college while Amber's was paid for. I've never asked either of you for a single thing. And now you're standing in the house I bought with my own money and telling me I should give it away because Amber needs it more. That's not how the world works, Patricia." Amber started crying harder. "I can't believe you're being like this," she sobbed. "I thought you loved me. I thought you'd want your niece to have a good home." "Your daughter is going to have a good home," I said firmly. "The home that you and Derek provide for her. That's not my responsibility." Patricia's face was now completely red, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You ungrateful little brat," she hissed. "After everything I did for you. After I welcomed you into my family when your father remarried. After I treated you like my own daughter. You treated me like a convenient extra," I said, the words finally spilling out after 15 years. "You treated me like I was in the way of your real family with Amber, and now you're trying to guilt me into giving away the one thing I've built entirely on my own. I'm not doing it." "Then you're not the person I thought you were," Patricia said coldly. She turned to Amber. "Come on, sweetie. We're leaving. Your sister has made her priorities clear." "Wait, Patricia," I started to say, but she was already opening the office door and walking out into the living room where my party was still going on. Amber followed behind her, crying audibly now. What happened next was something I'll never forget. Patricia walked directly to the center of my living room, where about 40 of my guests were gathered, talking, laughing, enjoying the party. She raised her voice loud enough that every conversation stopped. "I want everyone here to know exactly what kind of person Rebecca Harrison really is," Patricia announced, her voice dripping with contempt. The room went completely silent. Every single person turned to look at Patricia, then at me standing in the doorway of my office, frozen in shock. "My daughter," Patricia continued, gesturing to Amber, who was still crying beside her, "is 6 months pregnant with her first child. She and her husband are living in a cramped apartment, struggling to make ends meet, trying to prepare for a baby. And meanwhile, Rebecca here has bought herself this enormous house, 3 bedrooms she doesn't need, all for herself, just to show off how successful she is. I felt my face burning. Patricia, stop, but she wasn't stopping. We asked her politely if she would consider helping her own sister, her own family, and do you know what she said? She said no. She said she worked too hard for this house to share it with family who needs it. She'd rather let her pregnant sister and baby niece suffer than give up even one room of her precious new house. My colleagues were staring. My friends were frozen. My former professors looked deeply uncomfortable. This was happening. This was actually happening at my own housewarming party. Amber was sobbing now, full theatrical sobs. "I thought you cared about me," she wailed in my direction. "I thought family mattered to you." "Family does matter," I said, my voice barely steady. "But that doesn't mean I have to give you my house, Amber. That's not reasonable." "Reasonable?" Patricia interrupted, her voice rising even higher. "What's not reasonable is a 30-year-old woman living alone in a house this size while her sister is about to bring a baby into a 2-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and broken heating. What's not reasonable is someone who has everything refusing to share even a little bit with someone who has nothing." "Amber doesn't have nothing," I said, trying to defend myself in front of all these people. "She has a husband. She has an apartment. She has a family who doesn't care about her." Patricia cut me off. "That's what she has. She has a half-sister who sees her as competition rather than family. And that's on you, Rebecca. That's the person you've chosen to be." David Chen, my CTO, stepped forward. "I'm sorry," he said carefully, "but I think this might be a private family matter." "Oh, is it private?" Patricia turned on him. "Is it private when someone chooses greed over family? When someone values square footage over their own flesh and blood? I think everyone here should know who they're celebrating today. You're celebrating someone who bought a $1.2 million house and wouldn't even consider sharing it with a pregnant woman." Jennifer Martinez, my lead developer, spoke up. "With all due respect," she said, her voice firm, "Rebecca worked incredibly hard for this house. She built her company from nothing. I don't think it's fair to—" "Fair?" Patricia laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about fair? I'll tell you what's not fair. What's not fair is that Rebecca got every opportunity handed to her. Her father paid for her education. He didn't," I interrupted, my voice stronger now. "I paid for my own education with loans. You convinced Dad to give my college fund to Amber." Patricia's eyes flashed. "Your father made his own decisions. And if you took out loans, maybe that taught you some responsibility, which clearly you still need to learn. The point is, you've had every advantage, every opportunity, and you've used all of it to build this selfish little life where you don't have to think about anyone but yourself." "That's not true," I said, my hands shaking now. "I've worked 80-hour weeks for the last 8 years. I've sacrificed relationships, vacations, sleep. I've earned everything I have." "And what has Amber earned?" Patricia demanded. "Tell me, Rebecca, what has your sister earned? The right to struggle? The right to worry about whether she can afford diapers? The right to bring a baby into an apartment that's falling apart? Amber made her own choices," I said, and I knew as soon as the words left my mouth that it was the wrong thing to say, even though it was true. Patricia's face went pale with rage. "Her own choices?" she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "You mean like choosing to get married? Choosing to have a baby? Those are normal, beautiful things, Rebecca. Not everyone needs to be a tech CEO to deserve a decent home." The room was completely silent now. I could see some of my guests looking at me with confusion, maybe even judgment. Others looked uncomfortable, like they wanted to leave but didn't know how. This was supposed to be a celebration, and it had turned into a public trial. "I'm not saying anyone needs to be a CEO," I said, trying to salvage anything from this nightmare. "I'm saying that I bought this house for myself. I'm allowed to have boundaries. I'm allowed to say no to unreasonable requests." "Unreasonable?" Patricia's voice hit a pitch that made several people wince. "What's unreasonable is your selfishness. What's unreasonable is your complete lack of empathy. What's unreasonable is that you'd rather see your sister homeless than give up your fancy house." "She's not going to be homeless," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "She has an apartment. For now," Patricia shot back. "Until Derek gets laid off. Until the rent goes up and they can't afford it anymore. Until the baby comes and they realize they can't fit a crib in that tiny bedroom. And when that happens, Rebecca, when your sister and your niece are struggling, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that you could have helped and you chose not to. Amber was still crying, leaning against Patricia like she might collapse. "I can't believe this is happening," she sobbed. "I can't believe my own sister hates me this much." "I don't hate you," I said, my voice cracking. "Amber, I don't hate you. But I can't just give you my house. That's not how this works." Patricia took Amber's arm. "Come on, sweetie," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We're leaving. Clearly we're not welcome here. Clearly Rebecca has more important things to worry about than her own family." They walked toward the front door, and I just stood there, paralyzed, as 47 guests watched them leave. Patricia paused at the door and turned back one more time. "I hope you enjoy your big empty house, Rebecca," she said, her voice carrying across the entire space. "I hope it keeps you warm at night when you finally realize that money and success don't matter nearly as much as family. But by then, it'll be too late. By then you'll have lost us forever." And then they were gone. The silence that followed was excruciating. For maybe 10 seconds nobody moved or spoke. Then, gradually, people started looking away, clearing their throats, pretending to be very interested in their drinks. A few guests made quiet excuses and left within the next 15 minutes. By 5 p.m., my party of 47 people had dwindled to maybe 20. David Chen came up to me in the kitchen where I was standing, staring at nothing, trying not to cry. "Hey," he said gently. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Did that really just happen?" "It happened," David confirmed. "And for what it's worth, I think you were completely in the right. What she was asking was absolutely unreasonable." Jennifer joined us. "She was way out of line," she said firmly. "You don't owe anyone your house, Rebecca, not even family, especially not after everything you've worked for." Their support helped, but I still felt sick. The party continued for another hour, but the energy was completely gone. People left in clusters giving me sympathetic hugs and reassuring words, but I could see some of them were confused about what they'd witnessed. By 6:30 p.m., everyone was gone and I was alone in my beautiful new house that had just been the scene of the most humiliating confrontation of my life. I didn't hear from Patricia or Amber for the next 3 days. I tried calling Amber twice to apologize for how the party had ended, even though I didn't think I'd done anything wrong, but she didn't pick up. On the 4th day, I got a text from Patricia. "Amber and Derek have decided to move in with me until they can afford a proper house. I'm disappointed in you, Rebecca, but not surprised. This is who you've always been. I hope you're happy with your choice." I stared at that text for a long time. Part of me wanted to defend myself again, to explain that I wasn't being selfish, that I'd worked for everything I had. But another part of me wondered if maybe she was right. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I should have offered to help somehow, even if not by giving them the whole house. I called my best friend from college, Rachel Thompson, and told her everything. She listened to the whole story without interrupting, and when I was done, she said, "Rebecca, you know this is crazy, right? Nobody gives away their house to their sibling because they're pregnant. That's not a thing. But maybe I could have helped them with rent," I said, "or offered to let them stay in one of my bedrooms temporarily." "Did they ask for that?" Rachel interrupted. "Or did Patricia literally demand you give them the entire house?" "She demanded the house," I admitted. "Then this isn't about you being selfish," Rachel said firmly. "This is about Patricia trying to manipulate you. Again, like she's been doing since she married your dad." That conversation helped, but I still felt unsettled. This was going to be one of those situations that I'd replay in my mind for months, analyzing every word, every choice. What I didn't know at the time was that the situation was about to get much, much worse. Or maybe, depending on how you look at it, much better. 2 weeks after the party, I got a call from Margaret Bradley, Patricia's sister, asking if she could meet me for coffee. Margaret had been at the party and witnessed the whole confrontation. She was 6 years older than Patricia, a retired accountant, and someone I'd always found more reasonable than her sister. We met at a cafe near my office on a Wednesday afternoon. Margaret looked uncomfortable from the moment she sat down. "Rebecca," she started carefully, "I need to tell you something and you're probably going to be angry, but I think you have a right to know." My stomach dropped. "Okay," I said slowly. Margaret took a breath. "After the party, Patricia was at my house, talking about what happened. She was still furious with you, and she said something that made me very concerned. She said, 'Rebecca acts so high and mighty, but she has no idea that I've been managing her trust fund for the last 4 years, and she'll never see most of that money.'" I felt cold suddenly. "What?" I asked her what she meant, Margaret continued, and at first she wouldn't explain, but then she'd had 2 glasses of wine and she started talking. "Rebecca, Has Patricia told you that your trust fund is worth $90,000? Yes, I said, my heart starting to pound. She said it underperformed after 2008 and never recovered. Margaret's face went pale. Rebecca, I helped your father set up that trust fund. I was one of the witnesses when he signed the paperwork. The initial amount was $400,000 for each of you, and it was invested in conservative mutual funds. Even with the 2008 recession, that money should have recovered and grown. There's no way it's worth only $90,000. Then what's it worth? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know exactly, Margaret said, but based on Patricia's comments and what I know about those investments, I'd estimate it's worth at least $400,000 per person, possibly more. Rebecca, I think Patricia has been stealing from your trust fund. The cafe seemed to spin around me. Stealing? I don't have proof, Margaret said quickly, but her comment was very specific. And I know Patricia. She's always been terrible with money. She spent beyond her means for years, and when she married your father, she suddenly had access to his assets. And when he died, she became the trustee of your fund. I think she's been using it as her personal bank account. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, trying to process what I was hearing. Because of what happened at your party, Margaret said. The way she tried to make you give up your house, the way she publicly humiliated you, it made me realize that she sees you as someone she can control and manipulate. And if she's been stealing from you, you deserve to know. You deserve to protect yourself. I sat there for a long moment, my coffee going cold in front of me. What do? I finally asked. You need to demand a full accounting of the trust fund, Margaret said. Legally, as a beneficiary, you have the right to see every transaction, every investment statement, everything. If Patricia refuses, or if the numbers don't add up, you need to talk to a lawyer. That conversation changed everything. The next day, I called Patricia and asked her to meet me. She agreed, though her tone on the phone was frosty. We met at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant, just the two of us. What do you want, Rebecca? Patricia asked as soon as we sat down. Another opportunity to explain why your career is more important than your family. I ignored the barb. I want to talk about Dad's trust fund, I said calmly. You told me it's worth $90,000 for my share. I'd like to see the account statements. Patricia's face flickered with something surprise, annoyance. Why? Don't you trust me? It's not about trust, I said, keeping my voice even. I just want to understand how an account that started at $400,000 ended up at $90,000. That's a significant loss. I explained this to you, Patricia said impatiently. The recession hit it hard. The market crashed. These things happen. Then the statements should show that, I said. It should be easy to provide documentation. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Who have you been talking to? No one, I lied. I just think it's reasonable to want to see my own trust fund statements. Dad left that money for me. I'm turning 30 in 18 months, and I'd like to understand what I'm working with. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I don't have the statements readily available. They're in storage somewhere. Then you can request copies from the financial institution, I said. As the trustee, you have access to all of that. Why are you being so difficult about this? Patricia snapped. After everything that's happened, after you refused to help your sister, now you're questioning my management of your father's assets. I'm not questioning anything, I said, though of course I was. I'm simply asking to see documentation of my own money. That's a normal request. Patricia stood up abruptly. I don't have time for this, Rebecca. If you don't trust me after everything I've done for this family, then that's your problem. But I'm not going to sit here and be accused of something. I'm not accusing you of anything, I said, staying seated. I'm asking for account statements, and I'll get them to you when I have time, Patricia said coldly. I have a pregnant daughter to take care of. Unlike you, I have priorities. She walked out of the restaurant, leaving me sitting there alone with a terrible, sinking certainty that Margaret had been right. I called a lawyer the next day. His name was Richard Brennan, and he specialized in trust and estate law. I explained the situation, Patricia being the trustee, my father's death 4 years ago, the trust fund that was supposedly worth only $90,000 when it should be worth much more, and Patricia's refusal to provide statements. This is concerning, Richard said after hearing everything. As a beneficiary, you have an absolute legal right to a full accounting. If the trustee refuses to provide one, that's a red flag. We can file a petition with the probate court demanding she produce all records. And if there's been misappropriation of funds, That's a serious breach of fiduciary duty. What happens if you find that she has been stealing? I asked. She could be personally liable to repay everything she took plus interest and possibly penalties, Richard said. And if it's egregious enough, there could be criminal charges for embezzlement, though that's harder to prove. I don't want to send my stepmother to jail, I said, feeling sick. I just want to know the truth. Let's take this one step at a time, Richard said. First, we file the petition. Then we see what the records show. You might be surprised. Richard filed the petition 3 days later. It was a legal document requesting that Patricia Chambers, as trustee of the Richard Harrison Family Trust, provide a complete accounting of all assets, transactions, and distributions from the date of Richard Harrison's death to the present day. The court gave Patricia 30 days to comply. Patricia called me 2 hours after being served with the petition. She was furious. "How dare you?" she hissed into the phone. "How dare you drag me into court like I'm some kind of criminal?" "I asked you nicely for the statements," I said, trying to stay calm. "You refused. This is the legal way to get access to information I'm entitled to." "You're entitled to nothing," Patricia spat. "Your father left everything to me, Rebecca. Me, not you. And if there's anything left in that trust fund, you should be grateful instead of acting like some spoiled brat who thinks she deserves more. The trust fund isn't yours," I said firmly. "Dad set it up specifically for me and Amber. You're just the trustee. You're supposed to be managing it for us, not using it yourself." There was a long silence. Then Patricia said very quietly, "You have no idea what you're doing. You're going to regret this." She hung up. The 30 days passed. Patricia's lawyer requested an extension, which the court granted for an additional 15 days. Finally, 45 days after the initial petition, Patricia submitted her accounting to the court. Richard called me into his office to go through it. He had printed out all 87 pages and spread them across his conference table. "Rebecca," he said seriously, "what I'm about to show you is very bad. I want you to prepare yourself." He walked me through it, page by page. The trust fund had indeed started at $800,000 total, $400,000 designated for me and $400,000 for Amber. The investments had actually performed reasonably well, recovering from 2008 and growing steadily through conservative index funds. By the time of my 28th birthday, my portion should have been worth approximately $463,000. Instead, according to Patricia's accounting, my portion was worth $91,000. Where had the other $372,000 gone? Richard showed me. Withdrawal after withdrawal, documented right there in black and white. $15,000 for family emergency 3 months after Dad died. $22,000 for estate expenses 6 months later. $8,500 for trust administration fees. $31,000 for beneficiary education expenses that supposedly went to me, but I'd never received a cent. $47,000 for property maintenance on a property the trust didn't own. And it went on and on. Over 4 years, Patricia had made 43 separate withdrawals from my portion of the trust, totaling $372,000. Some were labeled as loans, some were labeled as expenses, some had no explanation at all. "This is theft," Richard said flatly. "Clear, documented theft. She's been using your trust fund as her personal checking account." I felt numb looking at the papers. "What about Amber's portion?" Richard flipped to a different section. "Amber's portion is also depleted, but not as severely. She's down to about $267,000 from her original $400,000. Patricia took about $133,000 from Amber's share." "Why less from Amber?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "My guess," Richard said, "she sees Amber as her real daughter. She was willing to steal from both of you, but she left more for Amber because she actually cares about her." I sat down heavily in one of the conference room chairs. "What happens now?" "Now, we file a petition for breach of fiduciary duty," Richard said. "We demand that Patricia repay every dollar she took plus interest. We also file for her immediate removal as trustee and request that the court appoint an independent trustee to manage what's left. And we can pursue criminal charges if you want to go that route." "What about Amber?" I asked. "Does she know about any of this?" "According to the records, Amber hasn't requested an accounting," Richard said. "So probably not, though she's entitled to the same information you are." Something occurred to me then. "The house?" I said slowly. "When Patricia demanded I give Amber my house, do you think she knew I might find out about the trust fund?" Was she trying to get something from me before I discovered she'd stolen from me? Richard considered this. Possibly. Or she genuinely believes she's entitled to your assets because she views herself as the matriarch who deserves to distribute resources as she sees fit. Some trustees develop this mindset. They start to see the trust assets as their own money that they're generously allowing the beneficiaries to access. That's insane, I said. It's surprisingly common, Richard replied. Power corrupts, even in families. The court hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, Richard advised me to document everything, not to communicate with Patricia except through lawyers, and to prepare for the possibility that this would destroy what was left of my relationship with my stepfamily. I called Margaret and told her what we'd found. She was horrified but not surprised. Patricia has always lived beyond her means, Margaret said sadly. When she married your father, I thought maybe she'd finally have some stability, but I should have known. She can't help herself. Did you know she was taking money from the trust? I asked. No, Margaret said firmly. I suspected something was off when she mentioned it at my house, but I had no idea it was this extensive. Rebecca, I'm so sorry. This is my sister, and I feel responsible somehow. You're not responsible, I assured her. You're the one who told me to investigate. You're the only one who tried to help. 3 weeks before the hearing, something unexpected happened. Amber called me. Rebecca. Her voice was small, uncertain. Can we talk? Of course, I said, surprised to hear from her. Not on the phone, Amber said. Can we meet? Just the two of us? We met at the same cafe where I'd met with Margaret. Amber was 7 months pregnant now, visibly uncomfortable in her chair. She ordered a decaf coffee and then sat there for a long moment, not looking at me. Mom told me about the lawsuit, she finally said. About the trust fund. I'm sorry you had to find out that way, I said carefully. I was trying to figure out how to tell you. Amber's eyes filled with tears. Is it true? Did she really steal from us? I nodded. She took $372,000 from my share over 4 years, and about $133,000 from yours. Amber put her face in her hands. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God. Amber, I'm sorry, I said, reaching across the table. I know this is a lot. She told me you were being vindictive, Amber said, looking up at me with red eyes. She said you were trying to punish her for the house thing. She said you made up lies about the trust fund because you wanted to hurt her. I didn't make up anything, I said gently. The court has all the documentation. Every withdrawal is documented. Your lawyer can get you copies if you want to see them. Amber was silent for a long moment. The house, she said finally. When Mom asked you to give me your house, I didn't know she was going to do that. She told me we were just going to your party to celebrate with you. And then suddenly, she was in your office making this crazy demand, and I just went along with it because that's what I always do. I always go along with what Mom says. This was the most honest conversation Amber and I had ever had. Why did you go along with it? I asked. Because Mom always makes me feel like I can't survive without her, Amber said, tears streaming down her face now. She tells me I'm not smart like you, that I'm not capable like you, that I need her help for everything. And I believed her. I still believe her, most of the time. When she said you should give me your house, part of me thought maybe she was right. Maybe I do deserve it more because I'm going to be a mom, and you're just focused on your career. You don't deserve my house, Amber, I said, not unkindly. But you also don't deserve to be stolen from. She took money that Dad left for you, money that was supposed to help you build your life. I know, Amber sobbed. And the worst part is, I think she used some of my money to pay for my wedding. She told me she was giving me $35,000 as a gift, but now I'm wondering if it was actually my own money from the trust fund. It probably was, I said quietly. According to the records, there was a withdrawal for beneficiary life event around the time of your wedding. $35,000. Amber looked like she might be sick. So she stole from me and then made me think she was being generous? Yes, I said. I'm sorry, but yes. We sat there together, two half-sisters who'd never been close, both coming to terms with the fact that the woman who was supposed to protect us had betrayed us both. What happens now? Amber asked. With the lawsuit? There's a hearing in 3 weeks, I said. The court will decide whether Patricia has to repay what she took. My lawyer says it's a very strong case. Do you think she has the money to repay it? Amber asked. I'd actually looked into this with Richard. She has some assets, I said. Her house is paid off, worth about $425,000. She has a car, some jewelry, retirement accounts. But it's not enough to cover everything she took. She'll probably have to sell the house. Amber's hand went to her belly protectively. Derek and I have been living with her. If she has to sell the house, we'll have nowhere to go. You can figure something out, I said. You're stronger than you think, Amber. You don't need Patricia to survive. But I'm about to have a baby, Amber said desperately. How am I supposed to find an apartment and move while I'm pregnant? I took a breath. This was a moment of choice. I could stick to my boundaries, protect myself, stay firm. Or I could show compassion to someone who was also a victim in this situation, even if she'd participated in hurting me. You and Derek can stay in one of my spare bedrooms, I said, temporarily, until you get back on your feet and the trust fund situation is resolved. No rent, just help with utilities and groceries. 3 months, maybe 4. Amber stared at me. Are you serious? I'm serious, I said, but there are conditions. You and Derek both need to get jobs if you don't have them. You need to be actively looking for your own place. And Patricia is not welcome in my house. Not until this legal situation is resolved, and she's made things right. Derek has a job, Amber said quickly, and I'm planning to go back to work after the baby is born. I can waitress or work retail something. Okay, I said. Then you can move in next week if you need to. Amber started crying again, but differently this time. Why are you being nice to me? She asked. After everything Mom did? After what I said at your party? Because you're not Patricia, I said simply. You're my sister. You got manipulated just like I did, maybe more, and you're about to have a baby. I'm not going to let my niece be homeless because of Patricia's crimes. Thank you, Amber whispered. Thank you, Rebecca. That conversation changed the dynamic of everything that followed. Amber and Derek moved into my second bedroom the following week. Derek was actually a decent guy, quiet, hardworking, clearly overwhelmed by everything happening with his mother-in-law. They were respectful of my space, cleaned up after themselves, and Derek even helped me fix a leaky faucet in the downstairs bathroom. Patricia, meanwhile, was furious that Amber had betrayed her by moving in with me. She called Amber repeatedly, trying to convince her to move back, accusing me of poisoning Amber against her. Amber finally had to block her number. The court hearing arrived on a cold morning in November. Richard had prepared extensively, organizing all the financial records into a clear timeline of Patricia's thefts. I wore a professional Navy suit and tried to project calm confidence, even though my stomach was churning. Patricia arrived with her own lawyer, a man named Donald Freeman who looked deeply uncomfortable with his client's case. Patricia was wearing an expensive burgundy dress with pearl jewelry, putting on a performance of respectability. The judge was the Honorable Margaret Chen, a woman in her early 60s with a reputation for being fair but tough on financial misconduct. Richard presented our case methodically. He showed the original trust documents Dad had created, specifying $400,000 for each daughter. He showed the investment account statements proving the money had grown to $463,000 for my share. And then he showed, withdrawal by withdrawal, how Patricia had systematically stolen $372,000 over 4 years. Your Honor, Richard said, this is not a case of poor investment decisions or legitimate trust expenses. This is a case of deliberate theft by a trustee who viewed the trust assets as her personal funds. Ms. Chambers made 43 separate unauthorized withdrawals, many of them with fabricated justifications. She withdrew $31,000, claiming it was for beneficiary education, but Ms. Harrison never received those funds. She withdrew $47,000, claiming it was for property maintenance on a property the trust doesn't even own. She created false invoices for trust administration fees. This is fraud, Your Honor. Patricia's lawyer tried to defend her. Your Honor, Ms. Chambers was dealing with the aftermath of her husband's death while trying to raise 2 daughters. She may have made some accounting errors, but there was no criminal intent. Many of these withdrawals were for legitimate family expenses that benefited the beneficiaries indirectly. Indirectly? Richard countered. Can Mr. Freeman explain how a $22,000 European vacation benefits the beneficiaries indirectly? Or how a $15,000 car down payment for Ms. Chambers' personal vehicle serves the trust's purpose? Judge Chen looked at Patricia directly. Ms. Chambers, did you take $372,000 from Rebecca Harrison's trust account? Patricia's face was red. I borrowed some money from the trust during a difficult financial period. I intended to pay it back. Borrowed? Judge Chen's eyebrows rose. Did you have authorization to borrow from the trust? I was the trustee, Patricia said. I had discretion to manage the funds. Discretion to manage, yes, Judge Chen said. not discretion to steal. Ms. Chambers, do you understand that as a trustee, you have a fiduciary duty to manage the trust solely for the benefit of the beneficiaries, not yourself? Patricia didn't answer. Judge Chen looked at the papers in front of her for a long moment. Then she said, I'm issuing an order for immediate removal of Patricia Chambers as trustee of the Richard Harrison Family Trust. I'm appointing a professional fiduciary to take over management of the remaining assets, and I'm ordering Ms. Chambers to repay $372,000 to Rebecca Harrison's portion of the trust and $133,000 to Amber Chambers' portion for a total of $505,000, plus interest calculated at 7% annually from the date of each withdrawal. That brings the total to approximately $547,000. Patricia went pale. Your Honor, I don't have that kind of money. Then you'll need to sell assets, Judge Chen said flatly. You have 90 days to produce a payment plan showing how you intend to repay these funds. If you fail to do so, the beneficiaries have the right to pursue collection through seizure of your property. And Ms. Chambers, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal prosecution. What you did here is theft, plain and simple. Patricia started to cry. Not the manipulative tears she'd used so many times before, but real, genuine tears of someone who'd just had their world collapse. Her lawyer patted her shoulder awkwardly. We left the courthouse into the gray November morning. Richard was pleased with the outcome, already talking about next steps and collection procedures. I just felt exhausted and sad. When I got home, Amber and Derek were in the living room. Amber had been following the hearing through text updates I'd sent. She has to pay back everything? Amber asked. Everything, plus interest, I confirmed. About $547,000 total. She'll have to sell her house, Amber said quietly. Probably, I agreed. Amber was quiet for a moment, one hand on her pregnant belly. Good, she finally said. She should have to face consequences. She stole from us. She lied to us. She tried to turn us against each other. I'm done protecting her. That was the moment I knew Amber was going to be okay. She was finding her strength. Over the next 3 months, Patricia did indeed sell her house. She sold it for $431,000 and liquidated some retirement accounts to come up with the rest. She paid back $280,000 immediately to be split between me and Amber and set up a payment plan for the remaining balance over 5 years. The DA's office decided not to pursue criminal charges as long as she complied with the civil judgment, which was a relief to everyone. Patricia moved to a small apartment across town. She tried to reach out to Amber several times, but Amber held firm to her boundaries. I'll talk to her when she's paid back everything she stole, Amber said. Not before. Amber gave birth to a healthy baby girl in December, a 7-pound, 3-ounce daughter they named Sophie. I was in the delivery room, along with Derek. It was one of the most incredible experiences of my life, watching my niece come into the world, seeing Amber transform from manipulated victim to fierce mother in an instant. After Sophie was born, Amber and Derek stayed with me for another 2 months while they saved up for a security deposit on their own place. With Amber's restored trust fund money starting to come in, they were able to find a nice 2-bedroom apartment in a good school district, about 15 minutes from my house. They moved out in February, and we all cried, even though we'd see each other constantly. Now 1 year later, here's where everyone stands. My company, SecureHealth Solutions, just closed our Series B funding round for $12 million. We're expanding to 14 new states and hiring 43 additional employees. I'm still working long hours, but I've learned to set better boundaries. I actually took a vacation this year, 2 weeks in Costa Rica, the first real vacation I'd taken in 8 years. Amber is thriving. She went back to school part-time to get her degree in early childhood education. She's working as a teacher's aide while she finishes her coursework, and she loves it. Derek got promoted at his accounting firm, and they're talking about buying a small house in the next year. Sophie is 13 months old now and absolutely perfect. I see them at least twice a week, and I'm genuinely close with my sister in a way we never were growing up. Patricia has paid back approximately $380,000 of the $547,000 she owes. She's on track to pay the rest over the next 3 years. She lives in a 600-square-foot apartment, works part-time at a boutique, and has slowly started to rebuild some kind of relationship with Amber. They meet for coffee once a month, supervised meetings where Patricia is learning how to have a relationship with her daughter that isn't based on control and manipulation. She hasn't tried to contact me, and I'm okay with that. Maybe someday we'll have some kind of relationship, but not now. The trust fund money I recovered, $186,000 as my first payment, I split it into 3 parts. 1/3 went into investments for my future. 1/3 I donated to an organization that provides financial literacy education to young women starting businesses. And 1/3 I gave to Amber and Derek to use as a down payment on a house when they're ready. Was I still seeking justice? Or was I seeking revenge? I sat with that question for a long time during this whole process. And here's what I decided. Justice is about making things right, about accountability and consequences that serve a purpose. Revenge is about making someone suffer because you're angry. What I sought was justice. Patricia had to face real consequences for her actions, repay what she stole, lose her position of power. But I didn't try to destroy her completely. I didn't pursue criminal charges that could have sent her to jail. I didn't cut off any possibility of future relationship. I held her accountable while leaving room for redemption. And that's made all the difference. The house that Patricia demanded I give away, the house that started this entire chain of events, is still my home. But it's no longer an empty symbol of success. It's been filled with family dinners, with Amber and Derek and baby Sophie. It's been the place where my sister and I finally learned how to be real siblings. It's become exactly what I'd hoped it would be when I bought it. A home. Looking back at that awful housewarming party where Patricia publicly humiliated me in front of 47 guests, I can see now that it was the moment everything had to change. Patricia had been manipulating and controlling both me and Amber for 15 years, and she'd gotten away with it because we'd never stood up to her. The demand for my house was just her latest, most outrageous attempt at control. And by finally saying no, by finally establishing a boundary, I set in motion a chain of events that freed both of us. Sometimes the universe works in strange ways. Patricia tried to take my house because she thought I didn't deserve it, because she thought she had the right to redistribute what I'd earned. In doing so, she exposed herself. She revealed her true character not just to me, but to Amber, to Margaret, to the court system. And in trying to tear me down, she actually ended up giving me the most important thing I'd been missing, a real relationship with my sister. I think about my father sometimes, wondering what he would think about all of this. I think he'd be sad about what Patricia did, disappointed that the woman he loved turned out to be capable of such betrayal. But I also think he'd be proud of me, proud that I built a successful company, proud that I bought my own house, proud that I stood up for myself and for Amber, and most of all, proud that I chose justice over revenge, accountability over destruction. Real power isn't the ability to destroy someone who hurt you. Real power is the ability to establish boundaries, demand accountability, and still leave room for redemption. Real power is using your success to lift others up rather than to isolate yourself. And real power is knowing the difference between what you've earned and what you're entitled to. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that standing up for yourself doesn't make you selfish, please do me a favor. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss another story. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have let Patricia and Amber move in after everything that happened? Or would you have held firmer boundaries? Thank you so much for watching, and remember, never let anyone convince you that success you've earned is something you should be ashamed of. Work hard, be kind, establish boundaries, and always, always stand up for yourself. I'll see you in the next one.